whatever you want, whatever you need, just ask in his name. Everything you need is right here. Whatever you want.
The Heart and Soul Center of Light anniversary.
You can make it on your broken pieces. In fact, most of us have made it on broken pieces. Broken pieces of our identity, broken pieces of our families, broken pieces of our dreams, of our visions. We have made it on broken pieces. The place where we seem to fall off is having peace with those broken pieces and not wishing that those pieces were anything else other than what they are. Because as long as we want our pieces to be different than they are, we're not going to have peace, and we're not going to make it through. We're going to make it back to another experience, just like the other experience that gives us another opportunity to find peace. I had to learn about my broken pieces. I had many, many broken pieces, and I didn't even realize that some of the pieces were broken. The first piece that I discovered that was broken was my self-image, who I was, and who I thought I was, and who I had been told that I was. You see, one of the things that I learned in coming to peace with my broken pieces was that there are family pathologies that we inherit. Pathology is the study, the science of discovering what it is that creates dis-ease. And we have inherited, many of us, things from people known and unknown, seen and unseen, that create dis-ease in our life. And we go through our life living in a diseased state of identity, and we don't even understand where it's come from. I had a family pathology, a diseased pathology that took certain things away from me and gave certain things to me simply because I was a woman. And as smart as I was with all my degrees in education, I was still infected by the dis-ease of that family pathology. And try as I might to live beyond certain beliefs and situations and circumstances, I could not live beyond the dis-ease of that family pathology that told me as a woman I was not as important as men. That told me as a woman I did not have a right to have a voice. Now that's very strange pathology for a public speaker, that you are not supposed to have a voice. But what happened in my situation was I was able to live beyond the pathology by sheer brute force. I forced myself to do it. I pushed myself to do it, and the opportunities were created in my life so that I could do it. But deep down in the places between my toenails and my heel and my ankle, I didn't believe it. Just didn't believe it. Because it would mean that my grandmother and my daddy were liars when they told me you ain't nothing. When they said go somewhere and sit down and shut up. Don't nobody want to hear what you got to say. Why you always gotta have something to say? Why can't you just shut up? You get on my nerves, your mouth. Why don't you just do something with that mouth? That was a broken piece. And only through the grace of God was I able to live beyond it. I made it to another place with that broken piece. But there comes a moment when you have to reconcile your pieces. There comes a moment when you have to stand for your pieces. And if you don't understand what your pieces are, you could drown. I came from a family, a pathology in my family was one of dishonor and dishonesty. I came from a family where people would look at what was going on, see what was going on, and then talk about the weather. Nobody wants to talk about that alligator eating the table leg. There is an alligator, he eating leg off the table, and you people are trying to carve the turkey. What is the matter with you? And if you, like me, were to say something about the alligator, people would tell you was crazy. That is not an alligator. Go somewhere and sit down. Shut up. And sometimes, you know, that's a defense mechanism, and sometimes it's how people keep themselves safe. But you gotta know that dishonesty is like a cancer. And it erodes away the fibers of your being. So I lived in a pathology of dishonor and dishonesty. People neglected to tell me that my mother was dead. They just, you know, hey, she died when I was 2, I didn't remember, so what the hell? That dishonored me. But then they told me that somebody else was my mother, and that was dishonesty. Everybody in my family knew that my grandmother was crazy as hell. She was crazy as hell. Can you hear me? You know, the more loving thing to do would be to say that she was mentally ill. She was mentally ill, but her mental illness showed up as hellish craziness. Meaner than a wet cat. Can you hear me? She was meaner than a wet cat. And that energy had to be directed somewhere.